The red and blue lights sliced through the stillness outside my house at 3 a.m., flooding the street with chaos. I stood in the doorway, hand wrapped around the knob, exhaustion pressing heavy on my chest. My eyes burned as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Karen, yeah, that Karen, stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, smug as ever, like she ran the whole cul-de-sac. She was chatting up the cops, acting all innocent and high and mighty, accusing me of blocking her guests from parking in my own damn driveway. Freeze frame moment. Right there. That's me. The guy who found out she tapped into my private well to water her rose bushes without asking. What did I do about it? Flushed her lines with sewage. And believe me, that was just chapter 1. The kind of thing that makes people pause and ask, wait, how is that even legal? How did she not notice? But there I was, still in my doorway, trying to piece together how we ended up in this absurd circus. The officers were humoring her, deadpan faces, as she whined about my truck being, get this, half a foot over the driveway line. It was parked there legally. But Karen's guests might have to walk across the street, and that just wouldn't do. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was stunned. This is where we're at? Sir, it's a simple request, one of them said, voice laced with that practiced calm. If you could move the truck so her guests can park, there's no need to escalate. I blinked. Escalate? Really? I laughed once. Are we talking about global diplomacy here? Over a parking space. It slipped out. I couldn't help it. The whole thing was so far beyond ridiculous. Karen was already basking in the moment. I've lived here 20 years, she told the cops, her voice dripping with fake virtue. Never had a single issue until he moved in. She looked thrilled, triumphant, like getting me written up for parking too close to the curb was her life's greatest achievement. And now he's harassing my guests. I shook my head, biting back the kind of laugh that sounds too close to a scream. See, with Karen, it was never about driveways or violations. It was always about control. She had ruled this neighborhood like some petty dictator for years, until I showed up and refused to kiss the ring. She couldn't handle that. Ma'am, could you? The officer tried to get a word in, but she was already steamrolling through her victim monologue. Why should my guests be treated like second-class citizens? She barked. It's a neighborhood, not a public lot. I opened my mouth, but the cop jumped in fast. Sir, just move it, and we'll be gone. And that's when it clicked. Karen didn't care about fairness. She never had. This was the same woman who stormed into my yard over weeds near the sidewalk, while her backyard was full of banned plants straight from a botanical blacklist. And let's not forget the well. My well. She'd been siphoning water for months like she owned it. But I'd already turned the tables on her once. After that little stunt, I took action. Perfectly legal, perfectly petty. I flushed her system out with sewage. Just a taste of reality. It wasn't revenge. Not at first. Just a reminder. You mess with people, eventually they mess back. And here we were again. Karen, playing the same manipulative games, thinking her little HOA badge could shield her from blowback. But folks like her, they never expect pushback. They believe the word guest is magic. That if they shout loud enough, people will fall in line. Not this time. Officer, let me make sure I've got this right, I said, cool as ice. You're asking me to move my truck because her guests won't park like everyone else does? Silence. The cop just blinked. Karen, though, she exploded. I've bent over backward to be civil with you, she shrieked, hands flailing like she was starring in a bad soap opera. And this is how you treat me. That's when it hit me. I wasn't the one on trial here. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. She absolutely was. The cops had already let her slide way too many times, and if they didn't step in, I'd be stuck handling the fallout. But I wasn't letting that happen. Karen just made her play, and now it was my move. I gave a half smirk, turned around, and walked back into my house, leaving her and the officers blinking like deer in headlights. They didn't know what to make of me, and I loved that. I wasn't budging. I wasn't apologizing. This was just the beginning. Cliffhanger. As the door shut behind me, her shrill voice echoed through it, screeching something about dialing 911. Fantastic. Like this needed to get any dumber. The slam cut her off, but not really. Her voice kept cutting through like a badly tuned radio. This is outrageous. I'll call 911, she wailed. I let out a low laugh. It wasn't even an actual emergency. My truck wasn't blocking anyone's driveway. But Karen had a gift for turning mosquito bites into full-blown epidemics. I walked further inside, trying to process what just happened. This was clearly just the beginning of a mess. It wasn't just about Karen anymore. Now I'd have to deal with law enforcement. Which, let's be honest, was probably her entire plan all along. Put me on defense. Paint me as the neighborhood villain. I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. The day had been long enough without Karen's theatrics. I tried to stay calm, even though every nerve in me wanted to march out there and call her out on her nonsense. But I knew better. That's what she wanted. I could still hear her yelling from outside, working the officers like an actor gunning for an Emmy, probably ranting about how I was a threat to her peace or something equally unhinged. And this wasn't about a truck. It never was. This was about control. Her need to dominate every inch of this neighborhood, even if it meant making up fake crises. I glanced down at my phone. Nothing new, except a notification from the HOA. Of course, they'd been sending little passive-aggressive notes ever since she kicked off her personal vendetta. First, it was loud noise complaints, aka mowing my lawn at noon. Then it was the mailbox crack incident, because apparently HOA rules say all mailboxes must be flawless. Karen and her clipboard had them wrapped around her finger. I opened the latest email. Another warning. Ongoing disturbances between neighbors, it read. No investigation. No context. Just another slap on the wrist to keep Karen happy. That's when I knew. If I was going to stop this, it had to come from me. The HOA wasn't neutral. They were her enablers. If I wanted to fix this, I couldn't wait for someone else to stand up. I had to do it myself. I sat back, thinking. I needed a plan. Something clever. Something that would make Karen wish she'd never picked this fight. But it had to be legal, because Karen lived for drama and would twist anything into a courtroom-worthy offense. I needed to be surgical, precise. And while I was planning, that's when I heard them. Sirens. My chest tightened. I didn't even have to look, I knew. She really called the cops. Of course she did. Why wouldn't she? Drama was her oxygen. I rubbed my temples, already feeling the headache brewing. This was going to be a disaster. I walked to the window, pulled the blind down an inch. There they were, 2 police cars parked out front, lights bouncing across the street like we were on the set of a true crime doc. I could hear the imaginary voiceover already. What began as a parking dispute ended in chaos. That's all Karen ever wanted, to make a scene. And now, she had won. I stepped out onto the porch, keeping my cool. She wouldn't get to see me rattled. The cops were already talking to her. She was in full performance mode, playing the victim like she'd studied at the feet of a soap opera queen. Officers, I'm telling you, this man is out of control. Karen was crying, her voice shaking with manufactured urgency. He's blocking my driveway. My guests have nowhere to park. I've never been treated like this. I don't know what to do anymore. It was all so over the top, I nearly laughed. The officers glanced at me, then back at her, clearly unsure how to deal with this circus. It was obvious they weren't thrilled to be here, especially not over something so absurd. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, letting the silence stretch until one of them finally spoke up and acknowledged how ridiculous this was. Ma'am, can you explain what happened? One of them asked. His tone stayed calm, but I could read the irritation in his eyes. He'd handled enough of these HOA squabbles to know this wasn't worth a minute of his shift. This was way outside his pay grade, and definitely outside his jurisdiction. Karen shot me a dirty glare before she launched into her usual drama. This man has been nothing but a nuisance since he moved in. Now he's blocking my driveway so my guests can't park. I'm just trying to host a small get-together, and he's ruining it on purpose. How is that fair? This is a family neighborhood, not a 3-ring circus. I could barely keep from rolling my eyes. A family neighborhood? Really? She was acting like I'd kidnapped her guests or something. The officer looked over at my truck, parked legally, with 3 solid feet between it and Karen's driveway. It wasn't blocking a thing. Still, he asked, would you mind moving the truck, sir? Just to keep things from escalating. I shook my head slowly. I'm not moving it, I said, steady and calm. It's parked exactly where it's supposed to be, and I'm not going to let her bully me into giving up my own space just because she doesn't want her guests to walk 10 extra feet. There's plenty of room across the street. Karen's face contorted with frustration, her smug mask slipping just a little. This is insane, she shouted, her voice climbing into that glass-shattering range. I can't take this anymore. Right on cue. She pulled out her phone and started dialing 911. I just stared. Was she really doing this again? She launched into her sob story with the dispatcher, her voice dripping with phony desperation. "Yes, officer, I need help. He's blocking my driveway, and I don't feel safe. Please send someone." That's when it clicked. Karen wasn't trying to solve anything. She wanted war. She wanted to make my life so annoying and exhausting that I'd back down. And I decided, if she wanted a fight, I'd give her one. But it'd be on my terms. As I heard the approaching sirens, I felt something shift. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. My wheels were already turning. And Karen? She had no idea what she'd just set in motion. The next morning, I woke up to a silence that felt almost eerie. No Karen screaming across the lawn. No passive-aggressive HOA emails about parking etiquette. It was quiet. Too quiet. But I knew better. Karen hadn't won. Not even close. In fact, this was the calm before the storm. I brewed a cup of strong coffee and sat at the kitchen table, planning my next move. I'd learned something important that night. Karen operated on fear, on the assumption that people would fold under pressure. But I wasn't one of those people. I wasn't going to be her next doormat. I wasn't going to tiptoe around her tantrums. No, it was time to take control. First step? Gather evidence. If Karen wanted to twist the truth, I was going to twist it back, with facts. I went outside and took clear pictures of my truck from every angle. It was exactly where I left it, nowhere near her driveway. Her guests could have parked with room to spare. She was just looking for a fight. But I wasn't going to let her version of the story be the only one that existed. With that done, I turned my attention to the HOA. I knew they'd be circling back soon, probably with another one of their passive-aggressive letters. I needed to be ready. So I called the HOA office, cheerful, casual. Didn't mention Karen's name. Just asked for the full details of the neighborhood parking policy. The woman on the phone was more than happy to explain. Turns out, the rules were crystal clear. I hadn't violated anything. Karen's complaint had no legal footing. It was just her throwing another tantrum because someone finally told her no. I hung up with a grin. This was a chess game now. And Karen didn't even know she was already in check. I kept a low profile the next few days. Didn't provoke her. Didn't bite when she glared from across the street. Let her think she'd won. Let her get comfortable. Because while she was plotting her next move, I was already 5 ahead. And this time, I wasn't backing down. She was already in full-on victim mode, and nothing would have gotten under her skin more than me not giving her the satisfaction of being rattled. But I was paying attention. Oh, I was watching everything. Every time Karen left her house, I made a mental note of her car's spot, how her guests parked, the whole pattern. The more I watched, the clearer it became. Karen lived in this made-up world where the rules magically didn't apply to her, but were gospel for everyone else. She thought she could keep playing puppet master with the HOA and steamroll the neighbors without pushback. I was set on putting an end to that fantasy. One afternoon, Karen's guests pulled the same stunt again, blocking my driveway like it was no big deal, just like the day she called 911. They parked like they owned the street. This was the opening I needed. I pulled out my phone, snapped another clear shot of the car creeping into my driveway space. But this time, I was ready to go further. I had an ace up my sleeve. The HOA's own bylaws. I'd done my homework, and their parking policy was crystal clear. Blocking someone's driveway? Total violation. No ambiguity. And Karen's friends had made it a habit. This wasn't a one-off. This was strike after strike. I waited for the right moment. The next day, I sent an anonymous email to the HOA. Attached every photo. Cited the exact rule. I made it sound diplomatic. Said I was trying to avoid stirring the pot, but had no choice now that Karen had taken things to absurd levels. I even reminded them she was the one who kicked off the drama with her parking complaint. Now her side was breaking the very rule she weaponized. The tone was calm. Too calm, probably. But it was packed with receipts they couldn't ignore. I ended with a little nudge. If this didn't get handled, I'd have no problem involving city parking enforcement. Then I hit send. Leaning back, I could practically see her reaction. Rage, confusion, spinning her wheels trying to figure out who turned the tables. That's what this was, turning the game right back on her. She wanted to use the HOA like a hammer? I'd just made it a boomerang. And it felt damn good. Better than I expected. But I wasn't stopping there. This was just the start. The next few days were a mix of quiet and tension. Karen kept peeking through her blinds, clearly sensing a shift, but clueless as to what it was. She looked twitchy, like a cat that knew the dog was nearby but couldn't spot it yet. Meanwhile, I kept snapping pics every time her visitors repeated the offense. I was building a mountain of proof, and Karen was too wrapped up in her power trip to realize it. Then it happened. The HOA emailed me. They wanted to set up a meeting to address recent concerns between residents. Just reading the subject line got my pulse going. This was it. Game on. They took the bait. Karen was about to get hit with the very process she abused to go after everyone else. I opened the email and combed through every line. They were trying to play neutral, offering a mediation session between us. They mentioned her complaint, but they also hinted they were aware things weren't one-sided. She had no idea what was coming. I wasn't walking into that meeting defenseless. I was walking in armed with facts. Reading the email again, I felt this strange calm wash over me. I had everything. The evidence, the rules, the timeline, the emails. She had no room to spin this. And this time, I was setting the pace. She'd pushed the wrong neighbor. The HOA meeting was set, and I was more prepared than I'd ever been for anything. I packed my folder with everything. Pictures, policy printouts, emails, and detailed logs of every time Karen's guests broke the rule she pretended to care so much about. Even the HOA email where I outlined the whole history was in there. Neatly labeled, ready to go. The satisfaction of knowing I was walking into her territory with a bulletproof case? Priceless. This was what all those weeks had led to. Walking into that cold, beige meeting room, it felt like stepping into a courtroom. Long table, too many chairs. The board members with their bored expressions and dry paperwork. And there she was, Karen, sitting tall, arms folded, that smug smile that said she thought this was already won. She probably figured I'd come crawling in, ready to apologize for the chaos I'd supposedly stirred up. But I had no intention of giving her that satisfaction. The board welcomed me with their typical polite nods, but I could feel the weight in the room shift the second I stepped in. You could see it on their faces. They didn't know what was coming. Plenty of people had complained about Karen before, but I was likely the first who brought actual receipts. I sat down across from her and met her stare head-on, keeping my expression unreadable. Karen shot back with a glare, trying to look composed, but her trembling hands gave her away. She had no clue what was about to hit. The meeting started with the usual small talk, but things got serious once they asked about the issue between us. Karen jumped in first, spinning her version of the story like clockwork, how she was just trying to be a good neighbor, how I blocked her driveway, and how she'd only ever acted out of concern for the community. She played the victim like it was her job. "I just want peace," she said with fake sweetness. "But he's made that impossible. It's really disruptive." I kept quiet. No interruptions. Let her lay it all out. Dig her own grave with that smug voice. Once she was done, the board turned to me. I stood up calmly and walked them through everything, step by step. I explained how Karen demanded I move my truck from my own driveway, so her guests could have it. I told them I declined politely. There was plenty of parking on the street. And then, how she turned that into a 911 emergency, like I'd committed a crime. I brought receipts. Photos of my truck parked well within bounds, nowhere near her driveway. As I laid it all out, I saw her face shift. The confidence drained. She wasn't ready for this. When I passed the pictures around, you could tell the board was caught off guard. This wasn't just a he said, she said. This was evidence, solid, undeniable proof. And I wasn't done. I pulled out the HOA parking policy and pointed to the clause that stated no one could block a driveway, not even for a moment. Her guests had done exactly that, repeatedly, and I had proof every time. There was this quiet pause after, like the air had been sucked out of the room. The board looked at each other, clearly processing what I'd just dropped in their laps. Most folks gave up when it came to Karen, either out of fear or frustration. But not me. I didn't back down. Finally, one board member leaned forward. "Seems like there's been a misunderstanding," he said, glancing over at Karen. "According to the policy and what's been presented, the violations fall on your side, not his." Those words hit Karen like a brick. Her cheeks flushed red, and for once, she didn't have a quick comeback. "No," she fumbled. "This is all fake. He's lying to smear me." She tried to regain footing, but her voice cracked. The board exchanged looks, clearly uncomfortable, torn between loyalty and truth. But at this point, the facts spoke for themselves. Karen had been the problem, not me. Another board member cleared his throat. "Karen, we can't overlook the evidence. This behavior's disruptive," he said firmly. We'll be issuing a warning and conducting a further review. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, he continued. Also, we'll file a formal notice regarding the repeat parking issues with your guests. We expect this to be corrected moving forward. The look she gave was priceless. Furious, but defeated. She had nothing left to say. She'd been caught in her own mess, and for once, someone held her to it. As we wrapped up, a quiet satisfaction settled in my chest. I did exactly what I came to do. Karen had played queen for too long, and I'd just taken away her crown. Walking out of that meeting felt like stepping into fresh air, like a weight had finally lifted. Karen's grip on the neighborhood was broken, and I was the one who broke it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the upper hand, and I wasn't about to let it go. I knew this wasn't the final chapter. Karen was never the kind to lose quietly, but for now, I'd come out on top, and that was enough for me. As I made my way back to the house, a grin tugged at my lips. This wasn't some petty act of revenge. I didn't stoop to vandalism or cheap shots. Nope, this was sweeter. This was justice through the proper channels, showing Karen that her usual tactics wouldn't fly this time, that the world didn't revolve around her clipboard and threats. And me? I proved something bigger, that beating a Karen doesn't mean shouting louder. It means outthinking her, outmaneuvering her, and letting the rules she once twisted work against her.